how pizza proved Bitcoin works. Some of us may have heard this story before, but it really just showcases that there might be a legitimate use case in Bitcoin. So let's kind of get into what it is, why there is even buzz around Bitcoin, and what solutions Bitcoin provides to society as to why it has so much attention. So let's get into that. But in 2010, 10,000 Bitcoin bought 2 pizzas. Can you believe that? 2 pizzas. And today that moment marks the start of Bitcoin's real world journey and a revolution in digital money. Real world in the sense of it was the first time people saw the use case for Bitcoin and it wasn't all talk. So I'm gonna get into it, but I got to ask Gus, I remember the first time I seen Bitcoin, I was in middle school. It was called Jag News. My school was called the Janitel Jaguars. So at the end of the day, we had an advisory period and had like a 15-minute news segment, but it was very specific for like middle schoolers or like high schoolers. It was like that type of network. And it was the first time I even heard about cryptocurrency and that you could purchase things with these things. So at that time, it was such a new thing. And, people would ask, do you believe in this? Do you think this is going to come to fruition? Do you think this will have mass adoption? And at that time, it was just like worse. It was a bigger idea than purchasing something online with your credit card at that time. So it's just crazy to see now it come to fruition and it be a legitimate industry. So I don't know when the first time you heard of Bitcoin, but what was your perception of it?
Well, you were at a pretty advanced middle school if they were giving you guys Bitcoin in the school news. What year would that even be? Like 2012?
Well, it was 2012. It was exactly 2012. I believe I was in 7th grade, but it was just one of those ideas. It was like insane idea, but we have electronic currency. And that was like an insane idea. Like, what even is that? Will this even, and you kind of just brush it under the rug. And then 10 years later, you're like, what the hell is going on? This thing's legitimate. So
yeah, for me, my perception kind of just forever was that Bitcoin is that thing criminals use to like get ransom. Like that was the only capacity I ever really heard about Bitcoin in for a long, long time. And then I do remember pretty vividly, I guess when I was like 16, I would say like 2016, 17, like when the initial Bitcoin pump kind of happened and it became like a more mainstream financial asset and something that people actually trusted a little bit more. I believe that was 2016, 2017. We're going to get into a timeline here shortly. But that was the first time. I do have a pretty clear memory of I was going to pick up my girlfriend at the time. And I was a new driver. It was an exciting time of life. And and I remember seeing a headline that Bitcoin had exploded, and I was like, Bitcoin, like that, that weird fringe thing that people talk about that the criminals use. Like it was very strange to see it move up like that. And that's, I think that's the perception that is shared by lots of people who weren't plugged into the crypto space, in the 2000s and the early 2010s, was that you'd only ever hear about Bitcoin when some, criminal would demand 300,000 Bitcoins for XYZ. And so, it was interesting to me when it all of a sudden got legitimized by the market.
That makes a lot of sense, though, because that first perception makes a lot of sense because you would initially think, why would I even use why would I not just use Zelle or PayPal or use real USD cash? So it's like, if I'm using Bitcoin, it must be for another reason that might not be so legitimate. So maybe that's where the thought process took you, but that's an interesting take. You're right. At first, I was thinking maybe it's the word crypto. It sounds so cryptic, you know what I mean? But like maybe it was just the case of, why wouldn't I just use USD? Why would I even use Bitcoin? So
someone in chat said all I knew was Silk Road and that's it. Yeah, I think that's a pretty common thing.
Pretty much.
That's what the drug dealers were using. Sorry, go on.
No, yeah, absolutely. But as we see here, 2015, 2017, like you kind of just mentioned, crypto became a little bit more mainstream. That's when it really popped off. And it's like, this thing is popping off and kind of holding its value. Thereafter, going into a little bit of a bear market. But why May 22nd even matters, and this is celebrated globally, depending on who you ask, as Bitcoin Pizza Day. And like we just talked about, it's a symbol of Bitcoin's transaction from theory to use case. I kind of have the same perception of Ethereum, actually. I know like all those NFTs popped off, but I kind of had the same questions for Ethereum. It was like, what is the use case for this? And then after 2020, all the NFT projects started popping off. So it's like, okay, I see, NFTs built on the blockchain. I see the use case for Ethereum, and this pizza being purchased here, 2 of these pizzas being purchased was like the first time, the industry really saw a real life use case for something like Bitcoin. So it just highlights how early adopters really shaped the crypto history. But the first transaction was, again, May 22nd. That was worth $41 today, over $1 billion. So that $41 of crypto that was purchased for those 2 pizzas is now worth over $1 billion. And this marks the first real world use of the Bitcoin currency. So, I don't know, maybe it was one of those things where it was like, I have this crypto that's like less than a penny or whatever it cost at that time. And it's like, this will be cool to purchase something with. I don't know if you remember Kay, but Kay was on the Where Do I Start series. And she was a little bit more into a lot of the NFTs and the crypto and things like that. And I remember she had made a post on Twitter, and it was about Dogecoin when Dogecoin was really popping off. And what is his name? Dallas Mavericks ex-owner. Mark Cuban. Yeah. So Mark Cuban had a reply to one of her posts talking about, yo, if you want to spend your Doge, like this is when Doge is all over the headlines. And he replied to her on Twitter, like, yo, message me if you come out to one of the games out here. I would love to see how you're facilitating like the Doge transaction. Like, let's do this. You know, he was probably trying to make a play on like showing the utility of Doge. But anyways, whenever Doge came by, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll buy some of these Mavericks. I'll buy some of the Maverick merch because I just want to see the transaction of Doge. But if Doge ends up coming to be a big player like Bitcoin one day, which it probably won't, but if it did, you'd be like, or Kay might be like, yo, I cannot believe I purchased these tickets or I purchased this merchandise using Doge. But it was probably one of those things. You didn't think Bitcoin would come to fruition, and years later, you recognize your pizza is now $1 billion pizza. So I don't know how you might have felt about that. You're in that situation, guys.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I mean, I think that this pizza transaction was certainly just for the novelty and wanting to be able to spend these Bitcoins on something. I've read a similar story that happened maybe 4 or 5 years after this one, where Bitcoin had gone to, I think, 1,000, and a guy used it to, he had made like insane gains, and he used it to buy an apartment in New York, or a condo in New York City. And it's like now you're in a $100 billion condo or whatever it would wind up being. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's interesting. I have more points to give on this topic on a slide that's going to come up later. So I don't want to get into it too much. It'll be slide 4. I have some things to say.
All right, we got it. Why does Bitcoin even matter though? Is my question here.
It's a good freaking question, man. No, it's so Bitcoin, it acts as a currency, which is interesting. There's 3 criteria for a currency. It's store of value, medium of exchange. Third one escaping me. Chat can help me there. But it allows for a store of value outside of banks, and for a while to a serious degree, and now to a lesser degree, but still true, less tracking, less regulation, less oversight on what you're doing with your money, which that's the next part here, transparent, immutable via the blockchain, which I'll make a note on that front. I do think that something is going to have to be done on that end before this can actually be widely accepted as a legitimate currency. People want their tax money.
Why is that? Not to cut you off, but why is that?
I think, and I'll get into it more in the next slide as well, but I think that for the U.S. government, say, to start honoring Bitcoin and endorsing businesses using Bitcoin and facilitating these things and the businesses themselves too. I think that the U.S. government is going to want this regulated, because if Microsoft is taking all of their transactions in Bitcoin 100 years from now, and the government doesn't know what the hell they're making or what their losses are, what their profits are, anything like that, how do you tax them? That all gets very nuanced and confusing. So I think that while it is something that makes Bitcoin so great, the anonymity actually can be a drawback moving forward as well as in the context of wide-scale integration. But yeah, and then 2008 financial crisis, major moment for Bitcoin, loss of trust in traditional finance, and these things still happen. You still have runs on the banks. We just saw that Silicon Valley Bank last year, the year before, there was a run on the bank, and suddenly they need bailed out. And we have a 0% reserve requirement still right now, so I don't fault anybody who lacks trust in the banks. And this is an asset that is completely ambiguous of the banks. If there was a total run on the banks and everybody can't get their money out, if you have Bitcoin, you'd be good to go. So yes, and then also introduce the concept of digital scarcity. This is a very, very interesting thing to me and has always been the most interesting facet of Bitcoin. And I believe that the reason it began to run in the first place was because it was getting close to the cap and then has now hit the cap, if I'm not mistaken. But Bitcoin is like gold in that there is a finite amount, and that as and it goes away. People buy these things, will buy Bitcoin and lose access to their wallets. There's the Satoshi wallet still out there with God knows how much Bitcoin in it. And so, it's very interesting. And it is a market. If someone decides, and this is how financial assets move as well, of course, but if someone decides that they want to dump 100,000 Bitcoins back into the supply, that's going to kill the price of Bitcoin momentarily. I don't know if 100,000 is a justified number. Maybe 1 million would be better. But there is a number where you could just kill the price by simply taking down the scarcity, as opposed to a traditional financial market where your selling may hurt the price, but it's not because of the scarcity of those shares. It's because if you put enough selling pressure on, the price must come down. There's not enough bids to keep the price where it is. That while that is how Bitcoin moves, it's not why Bitcoin moves. It moves on giant sales and giant purchases because it is scarcity, and because when somebody buys 1 million coins, when MicroStrategy buys 1 million coins, it tangibly affects the entire market and the supply of Bitcoin. So it's fascinating.
Most definitely. I know, that 2008 financial crisis. I mean, it's not too much of a surprise why you might have lost a little bit of trust in the traditional finance, like you kind of just touched on too. And I see over here, not to get a little sidetracked, but I see Kraken purchased NinjaTrader, which I did not know that was the case. That's actually very, that's some news. I did not know that. I know Kraken was a little bit known more on the crypto side, facilitating a lot of those transactions. NinjaTrader, if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe they're their own broker, if I'm not mistaken, but I know they do have a front end software too. But kind of crazy to see a purchase like that, if that is true. I've not looked into that one. Slide 4 here. Is this one that you were going to touch on?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Lots of things to say here. So, will Bitcoin be adopted by the masses? I think the first point is that it pretty much has. As far as it is accepted as a legitimate financial asset. Accepted as a currency is a whole different battle. Tesla, PayPal, some nations are accepting Bitcoin. I believe El Salvador holds their entire Federal Reserve in Bitcoin, if I'm not mistaken, which
that's insane.
They're up.
Insane.
They're up. I'll tell you what, that was a fine move. Odell Beckham Jr. took his Rams salary in Bitcoin. There's a few people like that. And then, countries like Switzerland accept Bitcoin for taxes, which, again, this is where this gets very nuanced to me. I don't understand Switzerland accepting Bitcoin for taxes, because if you're just going on the legitimate Swiss francs that they made in a year, I believe that's their currency, and then all of a sudden they pull out some Bitcoin to pay their taxes with, me as a government, I'm saying, man, how much other Bitcoin do you have? Where's this coming from? Are you making gains on this Bitcoin? I know that you are.
I gotta ask. You're making such a good point, and you almost alluded to this on one of the previous slides. It almost feels like it defeats the purpose of a blockchain and having something decentralized, even if there was regulation. I know this is there's a lot of skepticism right now, or it's just in the air. But even if there was to be regulation, could there not be another network or another blockchain or another coin produced that's outside of the power of government regulation? It's like, wouldn't there just be another? It's almost like we're going to do what we just did to the USD to Bitcoin. It's going to force somebody to create something new for us to have the decentralization again. And it's like we're kind of a dog chasing our own tail now. Same cycle over and over again. That's what it seems like right off of the bat.
Yeah,
but 100%.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. I think dog chasing its own tail is a great analogy, because there's a constant battle, between people who want this to be a currency, but simultaneously want anonymity. And I don't know that you can have both things. Use cases expanding into store of value, digital gold, payment rails, all very valid use cases. But this last bullet point is the most critical bullet point in the entire slide deck to me. Volatility and regulatory uncertainty are still hurdles, and they're still big hurdles. And I have 2 points to make on this. I've made my regulatory point already, I believe. I think that if Bitcoin was to be this widely accepted thing, something you could receive your salary in, transact with on a daily basis, the governments of the world, not just the US government, are going to want to know where this money is coming from, going to, and be able to tax you on it. On the volatility side, this is something that I just wrote a piece on Reddit about this the other day, that I understand even less, is that Bitcoin is insanely volatile. I mean, it's noted for its volatility. So if I'm leaving my house and I want to walk down the street and buy a cup of coffee, and the price of Bitcoin goes down 1% by the time I get there, the price of the coffee has fundamentally changed. If they're pricing it in Bitcoin, my buying power for the coffee has decreased. It's essentially become more expensive to me if they're not doing anything to tweak those prices. And beyond that, when you get into bigger ticket purchases, say you wanted to buy, use some Bitcoin to buy a house. What if you have $20,000 in Bitcoin, it loses 1%, and then you're showing up to sign your closing documents and suddenly the transaction can't go through because Bitcoin isn't worth as much as it was 10 minutes ago when you agreed on the price. So I think that the volatility creates lots and lots of holes to me. I would be very interested to hear anybody in chat who might have input on if I'm missing anything here. But that's what's always jumped out at me, and why I have opportunities now to use some Bitcoin if I ever wanted to. Like deposits and withdrawals on a lot of sites will allow you to use Bitcoin, and I choose not to because I don't want to have to deal with the volatility even in the 20 seconds between when I withdraw in Bitcoin and when I turn that into cash. So the volatility is a huge red flag to me, and something that would need to be resolved if we were going to do this. Otherwise, it's like, I mean, it might as well be gold, and we might as well be bartering, which I suppose it is to an extent. So it's interesting.
I mean, it is a really good point. I know there was an argument made a lot of the time that, Bitcoin is a new standard for, it's like digital gold. And I see a comment here. It says, sometimes you want gold, sometimes you want silver, sometimes you want Bitcoin. I really like the phrase of that statement because it's kind of just saying it's a different flavor. I know we tried so hard to make, this is a digital gold, but so far it's not looking like Bitcoin is proven to be the digital gold right now. It's still looking like gold is proven to be gold. So in terms of value, the volatility of it, I mean, that's definitely probably the biggest fork in the road. How are we going to sustain something when the volatility of that asset is having volatility, that's not going to make anybody feel comfortable on a day-to-day basis. So we'll see what happens here. I mean, in terms of regulation, this is going to be an interesting one because, again, as you know, the government's going to want a piece of its pie. But I think that this is going to be one that the government is going to have an issue with when it comes down to regulating. I think they're going to be able to regulate some portions, some parts. They're going to be able to tax things the way that they want to tax. But when it comes down to knowing somebody's crypto wallet, like I believe the government's going to be able to see and view what's coming in and what's coming out. But I think they're not going to be able to put their finger on who owns this address or who owns this wallet. I think that's where they're going to have the issue. I think they're going to be able to see all these transactions, be able to track all of that. But a part of the purpose of crypto as a whole was the fact that you want to have to know whose wallet address it was, but at the same time, it provides a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of transparency is the word. So it's like a public ledger. So we'll see how this environment kind of develops and expands from here. I'm excited for it regardless. Again, it's not like we're trading crypto like we're trading a lot of these other assets, but whenever Bitcoin and crypto, whenever the topic is that, it's always an interesting one to take part of. So there's our take on crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I mean, and I will say this too, in a vacuum, as I don't have problems with Bitcoin, and as a growth asset, I really like it. I hold some myself. I have no problems with that. I just see hurdles as we move into trying to integrate it as a currency in the real world. Though I will add, to play devil's advocate, everything I just said about Bitcoin is also true to an extent with cash money. But the issue is that it's very difficult to pay in cash money for large transactions that would need taxes, like buying a house. You're not going to, I mean, maybe Floyd Mayweather does, but most people aren't pulling up to the closing with $200,000 in cash on their person, which would make it all harder to track. So it is. It's interesting. It's very nuanced, and I'm excited to see how crypto develops moving forward.
Before we wrap here, I am curious on your stance when it comes down to Bitcoin. I know you hold a little bit of Bitcoin. Is it more on the fence of, I like this technology, or is it more on the fence of, if this comes to fruition, I don't want to miss out, and I'm being a smart investor by spreading my seeds out a little bit so that I can take advantage of any type of upside move, or is it a little bit of both?
I think that both of those are more sophisticated than my line of logic. I hold Bitcoin because Bitcoin go up. That's really the reason. Bitcoin go up. Go to the next slide. Bitcoin,
me too.
Bitcoin go up.
Right. We got one more. Right. Bitcoin yearly performance. So Bitcoin has proven to increase over the years. And as you can see here from 2010, I mean, look at the price of that Bitcoin beneath a penny in 2010. Annual return just shy of 10,000%. We got 2011 sitting at about 30 cents. 30 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a massive increase from just the prior year. So 2012, 425, 2013, 1350, 2014, we got a pretty big jump back to 805. Pretty big pullback in 2015, back down to 320, 430, 960 in 2017. That rise that we talked about, that popularized crypto and Bitcoin as a whole a little bit more. Then 2018, we started to see a continued run, had a little bit of a pullback, went back down to about 3,700, 2020, 7,200, so on and so forth. But as you can see, Bitcoin is on the up. So if you need a reason to get long Bitcoin, I mean, you heard it here first about my man's Gus right here. Bitcoin go up, So we're on the ups.
They do.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Bitcoin do go up. Also worth noting, and this is baseless claim, but since 2011, we go 3 green years, 1 red year to the present. So if that
3
trend,
green years, 1 red year.
Yeah, if that trend continues to hold, that would mean next year will be a red year for Bitcoin. So we'll see about that. But yeah, and it's just crazy because if you look at any of these year start and year end prices, you would have to be a madman to be buying at the end of that year. If you looked at a chart of something that went from $960 to $13,000, you would be like, no way I'm touching this. This has to come down. This is ridiculous. Right. This is Palantir, whatever. But it just keeps on chugging. I mean, it actually did come down the next year, to be fair, but just keeps on chugging. We just keep having these years of triple digit and large double digit returns. And I mean, it's outpacing the market like crazy. So yeah, it's just, and
look
also
at these annual returns. Good Lord.
Oh yeah. And if I'm holding since 30 cents, I sell in 2014. There's no way I'm still holding right now. So yeah, it's just
30 cents.
Yeah. Maybe not even
2013. Yeah, not even then, man. I would have been out maybe.
That's true. I'd be out when I 10x'd, if that. I'm out sooner than that. I'm out when I double my money. So it's just, you'd have to.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm out at a penny I'm out at like $2, honestly. $3.
The people who have it the best are the people who find their wallets that have 300 Bitcoins in them right now because you didn't have the chance to sell this entire time. you were forced to diamond hands.
I remember when I first got into trading, when you first start exposed to trading, your like natural inclination is to buy something as it's already going up. It's like if Bitcoin happened to be your first experience with any market and you saw it going up and you just were like, oh, I'm getting in, that natural habits, you probably were blessed on a position like Bitcoin. So I hope everybody finds their wallets. I see some people lost their wallets in the chat. I hope one day you find those wallets so you can retire all your kids and your grandkids because those are probably up a pretty penny right now. So if you find your wallets, Gus and Errol will be on here Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'll drop our emails in the chat if you ever find those wallets. But anything else to add before we hop on out of here today, Gus?
Yeah, no, nothing. Good luck. Good luck on the wallet recovery. I would imagine that's quite a frustrating phenomenon.
Bro, I've seen some stories where some people go digging to find their wallets. Like they will search through everything because it's like a jackpot if they can find it. So
yeah. Happy hunting. I wish you all the best. May you find 100 Bitcoins in your wallet and retire.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for today's segment. A little bit on Bitcoin and the yearly performance. We will be back next Tuesday, breaking down our risk of the week. So we'll give a little bit of an update on our portfolio. We'll be putting on a new risk as well. Shout out to the target position, Gus. I know you added me on Twitter and I seen the down move on target. So hats off to you. We'll check that out here on Tuesday, but that's going to do it